Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner, regular shirt, to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
This is Phil Stevens, strength coach. I run Strength Guild in Kansas. I'm a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and I get to pick up my half a cow today. So I'm happy.
Nice. This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson. I'm getting half a cow in 2 weeks, so I have to compete. So,
there you go.
Yeah, I'm excited. I just got a new grill the other day, too. So, Associate Professor, Carrick Institute, accredited the Flex Diet certification.
And this is Nicole Corkrean. I'm currently studying for my master's degree in exercise and nutrition science at the University of Tampa.
Sweet. Okay. Well, Nicole, I hope you're not a vegetarian after those intros. These guys are eating half a cow. Phil may be at a time. So.
Yeah, there you go.
Everybody, we have just a little bit of news. We don't want to overdo it, so we can get to our guest. We'll talk with Nicole a little bit about her origin story with sports nutrition, why she decided to go so far in school in a topic like that. And then we're going to talk about intermittent fasting, among other things, after the break. So that should be interesting. Let's start with just two little news tidbits. These are not studies, but I think they could be interesting for our listeners just to keep an eye on what's coming down the pike.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This first one, FDA provides additional flexibility regarding nutrition and supplement facts labels. So if you haven't been keeping up on this, the FDA, because of different commissioners coming and going and the politics involved, it seems like, they, in my mind, they seem to be waffling a little bit on how they're going to enforce things. Not always that they're willing to change rules outright, but just, we're going to give you more time for this, or we're going to enforce that more lazily kind of thing. So this came out, this is about 3 weeks ago. It says the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is announcing additional flexibility for manufacturers who need to comply with the updated nutrition and supplement facts labels. Those requirements were set for January 1st of 2021. So we even talk about this in the classroom, like, the new labels, were they worth billions of dollars, basically to reprint with the calorie number so huge. And they included the added sugars subcategory under carbs and all that kind of stuff. It says this upcoming compliance date applies to manufacturers with less than 10 million in annual food sales. It says the FDA will not focus on enforcement actions. So the compliance remains in place, but they're not going to enforce it. And this is what I mean about sometimes hearing this stuff and it seeming, like it's wishy-washy maybe. But they're not going to focus on enforcement actions during 2021 for smaller food manufacturers. And then this is curious. They specifically mention manufacturers of packages and containers of single-ingredient sugars. So I don't know if this is like the Sugar Refiners Association back at the negotiating table with them or what, because of course there are some groups that don't want added sugars to, put on the label. I mean, to a physiologist, Nicole, you know this. I mean, sugar is a sugar, but then, the what else is in that food as a package? If you drink orange juice, you have other things coming along with it at least. Instead of, red number 5 or something like that. It says the FDA has heard from some manufacturers that more time may be needed, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're starting to see these new food labels crop up, you may not see the brand new ones on certain, as far as I can understand, certain sugary food products. I imagine if it's entirely sugary, like the added sugars subcategory that was so controversial, that would be like the entirety of the label. I don't know. So, I don't know. Weird enforcement stuff coming from the FDA as far as those new food labels. And this is supplement labels too. So the supplement facts panels, they might not have to be updated as quickly. This other one, piece of news, this is also vaguely related to COVID-19. What isn't these days, I guess. The World Health Organization endorses clinical trials for herbal medicines to treat COVID-19. Now, I think this is interesting because we hear so much about the vaccines, right? Moderna and Pfizer and all these companies. Some of these companies are saying they don't want to make any money off of the vaccines. Other companies, of course, are not being so generous. But there are places around the world where people just don't have the money, right, or the access to some fancy new mRNA vaccine from Moderna. So it says the World Health Organization has endorsed a protocol to put African herbal medicines through clinical trials as possible treatments for COVID-19. Now, you might say, well, Lowry, who cares? We live in the States, right? Not to say that certain parts of the United States aren't bad, right? Like Florida, Nicole, but just saying. But it says the onset of COVID-19, like the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, has highlighted the need for strengthened health systems and accelerated research and development programs, including traditional medicines. It says Prosper Tumuslime, Tumuslime. He's the WHO regional office director, I think, there in his portion of Africa. Anyway, it says, as part of the protocol, any medicines from trials that could be considered effective and safe will essentially be looked at by WHO, and then the World Health Organization would recommend them to be fast-tracked for large-scale manufacturing. Now, you might think, well, where's this coming from? Again, you're talking about some economies there, right, in different countries in Africa that they're not going to have access to all the latest and greatest, probably. But it says the news comes after earlier claims from Madagascar that an herbal concoction known as COVID Organics, this almost sounds like a U.S. supplement company, COVID Organics is able to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So they're not sharing the results of the clinical trials, apparently, but the president of Madagascar, Andry Rohelina, says that free distribution of the drink was responsible for the low infection rates in one of Madagascar's capital suburbs. So this was a little piece by Annie Lennon in Lab Roots newscatcher thing here. So I don't know. We may start seeing that trickle over if the World Health Organization starts saying, hey, herbal medicines may be helpful or herbal supplements may be helpful, and we're going to fast-track them. I'm going to be curious to see if we start seeing supplement companies here daring, to go into those waters. So we'll have to see.
I'm sure they probably will.
Yeah. Well, if WHO says, all right, we're going to take this more seriously, all right, you know how these small supplement companies work. They can find people to do little mini trials for them and find something good that they can exaggerate on the label.
Well, I suppose if it's an herbal, do they even, as long as they're careful with what claims they're making, I mean, there's no patent or anything else, so if it's an herbal, it should be, potentially over the counter too in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're doing it because it's cheap and accessible to people in Africa, right? But I think also because of the Madagascar claims, it's getting worldwide attention, And I think everybody has that little hope, like maybe there's some botanical, that would actually help in some way. Yeah, I wonder, you're right, though, if they stick here in the States to structure function claims, those may help support a healthy immune system, and I don't know. I don't know if they would dare start saying may help support immune system to fight COVID, but somebody would try. In fact, I didn't bring it up, but the origin company of DMAA is still fighting to get those extracts. Those what is that stuff called, Mike?
Geranium extracts.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, right. Geranium dimethyl. I don't even remember. I've kind of written it off my page, right, because it was sort of banned. I think it was the main ingredient. Wasn't it in Jacked 3D or?
Yeah, that was the main ingredient that had it, and other companies soon kind of followed suit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's High Tech Pharmaceuticals is the ones that are still suing the FDA, and they were supposed to have a verdict a couple months ago, I think, but I've kind of lost track of what's happened to it legally.
Well, if I read it right, I just read that a judge ruled against them. Like, no, this is either it wasn't in substantial amounts, in geraniums to be considered, but it sounds like it wasn't going well for the company that wanted to fight to somehow keep it going. So the herbal stuff, yeah, it's fraught with gray areas, I guess.
Yeah, especially in that even gray area. Now you're talking about something that we could argue may or may not show up in nature. That's probably even debatable in that
That's
case.
What I mean, right?
And then
yes. Mm-hmm.
You're organically synthesizing it. And again, I'm not an attorney in this area. This is definitely not my specialty, but that's an even bigger gray area because, creatine is synthetically made now. Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff that's, based on something that's naturally occurring, you're not taking that thing and the naturally occurring thing. We're not boiling down a bunch of steaks to get creatine. We're using organic chemistry to create it in the lab, even though the end product is literally identical.
Right. Yeah.
But that even gets messy because now do you have to kind of organically source it? So far, the FDA has said you can, take other processes to make it, but in this case, it kind of looks like not so much. So, and again, I don't know what the exact ruling on this case was.
Yeah, I'll have to dig it up. I just read this earlier in the week that there was a ruling, as I understand it, against the manufacturer, that maybe it didn't meet the criteria that the company wanted. But like we said, that's a gray area. I don't know. Maybe somebody more familiar with that will call in and be like, you guys, you're talking about our product. Well, then enlighten us, right? Because, I like I said, at least me personally, I am the world authority on my own opinion. And my opinion is I've written that off my interest list a little bit personally. I only tried that stuff once, actually, and I wasn't a huge fan of how it made me feel, but maybe that's just me. I'm sensitive to stimulants and stuff. Phil, you tried that geranium stuff. Both of you guys did, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did. It's been a while.
Yeah. But I don't want to go on too much of a tangent with that. So, yeah, anyways, who knows? We'll see similar herbal constituents, something that's natural source, start entering the COVID-type markets. Look what they did with CBD oil and stuff. Like, if there's a new industry that crops up quickly, man, people are falling over themselves to become a part of that.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother show in
itself. It is, yes, it is. All right. So, Nicole, let's get to you. Let's start with your origin story, as we are wont to do. How did you get started with sports and an interest in nutrition and just all of the above?
Yeah, so I've played soccer ever since I was like 8 years old, and I always was working out for that, and then on my own was really interested in nutrition and supplements. But I actually started out in college as an engineering major, and then really struggled with calculus, but I was also playing soccer, and my GPA was so bad after my first semester. My coach was like, you won't be able to play if you don't bring your grades up. And then at the start of my sophomore year, I actually withdrew and went home to be with my dad because he was receiving a heart transplant at that time. And then after his recovery, I was like, all right, I need to get back to school because I definitely wanted to use the rest of my athletic ability for eligibility for soccer. And then it was kind of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to study? And then I thought, I've played soccer all this time. I enjoy working out. I enjoy reading up on nutrition. Why don't I just go and study in school. So then that's when I transferred to Mount for exercise science, and also played on the soccer team there. And instantly I just really fell in love with it. I was finally like succeeding in school. So I was like, oh my gosh, just relieved that it wasn't me. I just wasn't studying something I was passionate in. So, yeah, it just kind of instantly clicked. I really loved learning, like what I was learning in the classroom, and then wanted to start applying that to my own training for soccer. This really helped me because for women's soccer, at least in my experience, there was never a set like lifting like program for us. It was a lot of endurance training, agility, and we were given workouts from our coaches who didn't have a background in exercise science, which that's fine. Like they kind of just Google what to do and find what they can on the internet. So yeah, we didn't spend a lot of time in the gym, and when we did, it was just group workouts, mostly endurance based, and that was fine. But kind of learning what I was learning in class, I wanted to apply that to get stronger and kind of improve my performance.
Sure.
So that's when I got into lifting after my junior year season, and kind of that summer going into senior year. I really wanted to have a really great senior year. And so I stayed the summer at school and was just really got into lifting, just doing crazy volume, and really saw, like being a beginner, I instantly saw those gains really quickly, and that kind of solidified my interest in lifting and continuing to lift. And then I definitely saw an improvement my senior year performance wise, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I wish I had done this my whole 4 years. But from that, I just really enjoyed learning more and more about strength training and the nutrition that goes along with it. So that's kind of what led me to the University of Tampa. I loved what I learned in undergrad, and I just wanted to build upon that. So
right now,
that's kind of my journey.
So my perception when I think about Tampa and some of the sports nutrition in Florida is that there's a lot of people down there that are resistance training focused, physique, bodybuilding, muscle building. Was that your experience, or were you working with faculty and other students that were more into team sports and endurance stuff, or what's the flavor down there?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed my program because it was a real mix of different interests within the faculty. Like one faculty, he did cardiac rehab, so a lot of it was exercising with special populations. And then another professor had a endocrinology background, and he wanted to do more with pre-diabetes and HIIT training for pre-diabetes. But then I did have a professor who was really into strength and training, and I had quite a few strength training classes with him. He was really into periodization, and that's what a lot of his work was in. So I definitely was exposed to a lot. And then also we had a nutrition professor who did sports nutrition and like supplements and ergogenic aids. So yeah, it was kind of a lot, but it was only a year program. So I kind of don't like how quickly it went by. I kind of am wanting more. Right.
Well, that's interesting. It was only a year. How does that work? I mean, did they accept some courses that you had coming in, or it's just built that way?
It's just built that way. It was you pretty much go all year round, and it's pretty intense, like the course load, and it's a hybrid program as well. So we actually only met 1 day a week, and then did the rest online. So it was left a lot of time for if you wanted to do internships and stuff as well.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to get your hands dirty as it were. Did you get involved in any research down there? Or, I mean, I guess with COVID and everything, it's kind of hard to do a lot of these things, right?
Yeah, I was really disappointed because I was going to get into I think where they were doing something with carbohydrate rinsing, like mouth rinsing with a carbohydrate, basically like mouthwash.
Yep.
And I was going to get involved in that. And then COVID happened. I went on spring break expecting to return, and then we just never returned. So I really only got my fall semester and a little bit of my spring semester down there, and I came home ever since then. So it was definitely weird having it online, and I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to do more in the lab.
Right. Especially, obviously, you have a little bit of background presenting research and writing it up and stuff like that. Not all master's people have that, so because you understand it, I can see that'd be a bummer not to get to use a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So, nutrition interest specifically for you, it sounded like when you started strength training, the early gains were a big motivator. In fact, we've talked about that on the show before, right? I think a lot of people, they get into nutrition for fat loss purposes, and in a lot of ways, that backfires, right? Because it takes a long time to lose enough fat. Like, you have to really be successful for quite a long time before you start to, other people are like, wow, you lost so much fat, but with strength gains, they come fast enough to motivate you, and that kind of stuff. So is that part of the thing with the nutrition, that you were seeking to, like, nutrition support for the strength gains that you were making?
Yeah, I learned now that I was severely under eating as an athlete, and I, knowing what I know now, wish I would have been, because I suffered from female athlete triad, and I'm just imagining if I had the supplement and nutrition knowledge I have now and would have known that while I was an athlete, like how much better my performance could have been.
Right, yeah. I imagine you'd want to help other people too. I mean, what's your future plans? Are they kind of up in the air? I mean, obviously with the pandemic and everything, things are a little weird, but what's the eye on the future?
Yeah, I'm currently searching for an internship. I've had a few fall through due to the coronavirus, but yeah, I'm just job hunting, and I may attempt to finish my master's with that internship and then maybe apply to some doctoral programs just to continue learning on. And,
there you go.
Yeah.
Professor Corkrean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because that's what I was, when I say, like, what's immediate plans, or not so much immediate, but career-wise, you think you'd want to work with other soccer athletes and sort of preach the benefits of strength and nutrition to them, or what? Or do you want to work with a patient population, like long term?
See, I have so much interest in all the areas, just being exposed to it in my master's program, that I'd like to try them all out just to see what I fit best in. But yeah, when I originally applied to the program, I was writing how I would love in my not acceptance, but like entry essay, how I would love to help athletes like me who, especially female athletes, I feel like not a lot of emphasis is placed on lifting and, maybe helping athletes develop that way. It doesn't have to all be running and endurance. Like, you can get in the gym and lift, and definitely with the nutrition side as well. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was actually harming myself trying to do diets such as like keto while I was doing intense training for soccer, and that messed me up.
Yeah.
So if I could help someone prevent that and have a more successful season, that would be awesome as well.
Yeah. Well, Phil, of course, you part of your whole gym services is to try to bring people in and introduce them to strength and conditioning, right? It blows my mind that they go to university and they've got occasionally, they've got coaches Googling or looking at magazines for their training programs. Oh my God! Is that what you do, Phil?
No, but I mean, I have one client that was picked up on a scholarship to be a throw shot put, and he got there, and because he was a fairly big guy and lifted, they made him the strength coach for the whole throwing team.
Oh boy!
As a freshman, like, oh, you're big, so you're the strength coach. So yeah, I mean, it rings true what she's saying. So, and it's worse than that even at times. So,
right, yeah. Well, yeah. At least you're there to at least give the individual clients a head start. So when they go into that program, they can recognize, sort of like Nikki eventually did. Like, I'm not sure this is a professional S&C program.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. I mean, at the same time, you can't blame a lot of it. Look at aside from the top 1% of strength and conditioning coaches at the collegiate level, I mean, they're paid peanuts and asked to work exorbitant hours.
Right.
Yeah. So.
No, I get it. I'm used to the nutrition stuff, Nicole, like you saying, geez, I just started picking up on this nutrition stuff myself. I mean, that's a shame, right? That most universities, and obviously I'm biased, but they should have a nutritionist on board, right? Because you work your butt off on the field or in the gym, and then, you ignore the fuel and the building blocks that make it all happen. Only 10% of your day is spent actually training with the team, and that's if you spend about 2.5 hours doing that. The other 90% is just on you, and, good luck to you. And so it's amazing to me that collegiate athletes, it's just basically, I think, recruiting and genetic superiority that you get really gifted athletes at that level anyway, right? Because you just don't see strength staff and sports nutritionists on board at all schools, especially smaller schools,
Yeah, that's why I was seeking specifically a master's program that combined the two, and it was hard to find one. Tampa was one of the only ones in the nation that I found, so because I just think they go together. Like, as an athlete, you can't have one without the other, really. So
Yeah, that's true. Every time I've taken a post at a university, one of the first people I reach out to is if they have a strength coach. I start talking to that person because they seem to have an interest usually on the nutrition side of things. They understand, like you're saying, that these are two sides of the same coin. If you want to get gains for your team, then you got to look at this sort of holistically, That's actually what I was going to ask you about, why the decision for Florida, but it's because they combined some of the strength conditioning stuff with the nutrition, right?
Yep.
Okay, everybody, let's go to break. We're about the halfway point. When we come back, we're just going to pick Nicole's brain a little bit about intermittent fasting and similar diets and, do they affect performance, all that sort of thing. So we'll be back.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you know who this is. So I'm here to tell you about Dr. Mike T. Nelson's new book, Why You Should Eat Keto. I don't do it because, look at me. Come on, I'm fabulous and I'm fantastic. Anyway, you should text the Keto ebook, all in one word, to 44222 to receive your free copy. Do it now!
Okay, listeners, after more than a decade of joining us on the podcast airwaves, you can now also become viewers on YouTube. This is not our usual simple backup of the audio show, but rather a growing body of video taste tests covering various foods of interest to nutrition enthusiasts, bodybuilders, and powerlifters. From within YouTube, simply search for IronRadio Taste Test or Nutrition Radio Taste Test. In about 15 minutes, we cover taste and texture similar to other products, usefulness to the co-hosts, and whether we would recommend the product to certain clients. You may even want to watch our podcast feed or Facebook group for which products are coming down the pike so you can taste test them with us. Join us for this new monthly project. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, folks, we're back. It's Mike and Phil and Lonnie, and we have Nicole Corkrean with us, grad student, sports nutrition sort of specialty here. And we're going to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting. And before we get right into some of the science, Nicole, Phil, you were just mentioning something about Stan Efforting was just mentioning some of this stuff, right? Good, bad, or ugly? What was going on?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically just this week, and so it's kind of neat that this came on. But he cites two studies that from the JAMA Network. It's another peer-reviewed deal. But just basically what we were talking about before we came back on the air here. It's just that it's another tool, and it's not magic. You know, there's several studies that just came out that fasting for 16 hours a day may not make a significant difference in your weight loss or health markers if both groups eat the same amount of calories.
Okay.
And things like that. And then also some muscle wasting stuff. That some of that can be curved by if you're intermittent fasting and weight training. But for the average person, they were seeing muscle was going away with longer fasts and things like that. So he's just like, yeah, it's something that you might use, but a lot of people it's not great for. So it's just not the magic pill that it's being pushed as.
Yeah, it is popular. Yeah, and I think there's a genetic component. Over the years, I've read papers about how some people, they just go on hypocaloric diets, hypoenergetic diets, more successfully than others. You know, they don't lose a lot of muscle. Other people lose more muscle. And I imagine there's like genetic and hormonal control and all this stuff, just different between people, you know.
It brings me back to that, like we always talk about, it's cyclical. I mean, what was it, 15 years ago? That warrior diet came out. The goal is to eat once a day. You know?
Yep.
And that works, I suppose, as long as you don't eat 7,000 calories once a day.
Right.
You know?
No, you're right. Yeah. Homeostasis just ruins it, right? All these plans, all of this. Sagan used to talk about 100 years ago, there was in late 1800s, there was this quaint term called paradoxers. And paradoxers were people who had elaborate explanations for something that may or may not pan out, right? Or something that science already knows in simpler terms. And he used to lament, in the modern world, we are awash with paradoxers, So sometimes we want to believe something is, this is the bullet, the magic bullet. And, your body's even keel demand, your natural thermostat for all things, just it kind of doesn't always come out in the wash.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of them was the TREAT randomized clinical trial. The main author is Lowe. But what also I think is interesting too is that when you set this up, you're only really going to be limited to one thing you're looking at. And in the real world, because one of the groups was the quote unquote time restricted eating was from noon until 8, but that was an ad libitum period. So they could kind of eat whatever they wanted. I'm sure there's some parameters within the study, but only for 8 hours. And this was compared to eating 3 structured meals per day. And I've just noticed with working with some clients, even if we go lower calories and we've got 2 or 3 meals per day, they just seem to suffer pretty hard. But if I extend sort of the fasting window and be like, you can only eat between these time periods, and you don't have to be as strict during those time periods, they're like, oh, this is amazing. And they're eating really around the same calories. But their compliance for some people is going to be better. Other people are like, oh, the thought of fasting is just utterly horrible. It's the dumbest thing you've ever told me to do. I'm like, well, we're probably not going to use it then.
Right, for sure. Nicole, let me ask you, like, have you, I know you're familiar with a couple of studies on this. Have you seen, because you mentioned its popularity, is this more of a Gen Pop thing, or do you see athletes trying it? Because, you know, I would wonder, how is this going to affect your performance or whatever, but you think it's more of a Gen Pop thing, or you think athletes might be making the mistake and jumping into this, or what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think I would say the population it would work best for would be general population just trying to lose weight. And, you know, it kind of has, I kind of like it because it has easier rules. You just pick a time that you're going to eat between. You don't have to take out macronutrients like with keto. And so I think it kind of appeals to me for that reason. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for athletic populations, I could see it working in maybe a cutting mesocycle or, but yeah, you got to be careful with it just because mainly because protein, you know, with muscle protein synthesis, if you're trying to gain muscle mass or preserve lean mass, I wouldn't mess with it.
Yeah, you know, when you talk about like cutting mesocycles and whatnot, the last time I dieted real hard, every Friday I did sort of modified version of that. In fact, a colleague of mine, Ron, who, Nicole, you know, he and I would, on Fridays, we would just basically sip low-dose protein. It was sort of what Chris Shugart was putting out there, that pulse fasting idea, because I was paranoid, fair or not, right, real or not, I was paranoid about losing muscle mass, but I felt like I was getting middle-aged and I had to do something if I wanted to get real lean, in addition to just my usual, you know, pull a little bit of carbs out of the diet progressively over the weeks. And so that's what I did, and it did seem to help, but I can tell you, by evening time, because of the way I was doing it, I was wigging out, you know, because in the evening, you know, hunger is so bad, it's so intense. And I ultimately said, listen, I got to put something in my mouth. I am not the kind of person who, because my whole life, it's just in the back of your mind. I think, Mike, you've said this before. It's just this nagging voice. It's time to eat. It's time.
Yeah.
You're going to waste away, you know. And so I would eat, I would just make some like egg beaters or egg whites or something. Because I felt like it's almost liquid. I won't eat anything else, you know. But it helped me survive those evenings, because fasting all day, damn, you know. And again, Mike, I don't know because you've done this with clients before. Mm-hmm. Is evenings a rough spot for them, or not always?
It depends. So I have clients my bias is if body comp is our goal, and this is not necessarily for people who are trying to get super shredded, although it may apply, it depends on the person. You know, work up to, 19 to 24 hour fast like once a week. You know, that's kind of my bias, where, like you said, Nikki, we're still getting, other 6 days of, muscle protein synthesis is going to be higher. They're doing some weight training. They're getting sleep, all that kind of stuff. And I find just having a period of time where they're not eating for most people is easier. But I do agree with you, Lonnie, especially if their overall calories are very low, then, nighttime becomes a little bit trickier. But sometimes it's easier because that's also very social for them. So a lot of my clients are trainers and work with, clients all day. They come back, they have a family. So this way they can do a long fast and go from dinner to dinner and still have dinner with their family when they get home. So what I do to try to keep an eye on it is I have them report how did their fast went, how hungry did they feel. I look at their HRV the next day and the day of, and then they have to report what is the meal that they had for dinner. So if anything, I usually have them have more veggies, maybe double their protein.
Right, yep.
At first, I just tell them to eat your normal meal, but you have to report back to me what you ate. And if you eat 2 of your normal meals and then like 18 cookies, okay, you probably went a little bit too hardcore on your fast. So let's kind of back that up a little bit.
Right. In fact, just speaking with Chris Shugart back when he was, because I think he's got good ideas, right? And a lot of times, and when he's talking about be careful the next day, man, the more I've seen about at least extended hypocaloric diets, like every enzyme in your body is in storage mode when you start refeeding, And so I was always so paranoid. I get it. Your body's trying to put back a little bit of everything because you're sort of in this starvation period. But I was just scared to death, so I would always be careful the day after. And again, I was trickling in just a little bit of leucine and protein every 2 hours, But I would just be careful and not do what you said, like, woohoo, box of Oreos,
Yeah.
because I just felt like I was going to undo any progress I had made from all that suffering. Now, I know the concept of intermittent fasting is that you don't typically consume enough that you would actually match everything that you denied yourself, right? I think that's kind of the idea, that it's actually hard to gorge enough that if you spread it back over that last 24 hours, it still wouldn't equal what you would have consumed with regular meals. But again, I haven't been reading what's most recent with this kind of stuff. But Nicole, you said you were looking at a paper recently. What was that one about?
Yeah, so most of the studies and the systematic reviews have been on general obese populations, but I did find one about trained individuals. Specifically, they were resistance trained males, and the requirement was that they are regular resistance trained for the last 5 years at least. So these were like pretty trained, advanced athletes, and it was an 8-week study investigating intermittent fasting versus just a normal diet. So with intermittent fasting, they were an 8-hour window. I think they ate at 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. versus the normal diet, which was 8 a.m., 1 p.m., and 8 p.m.
Okay.
So they did match calories and macronutrients. This one I specifically wanted to talk about today because this study is cited a lot because it showed a greater fat loss favoring intermittent fasting, which people could use and say, oh, intermittent fasting it's better for fat loss and preserving lean mass. But upon further investigation into the actual data, there was actually a statistically insignificant 200 calorie difference between the intermittent fasting group versus the normal diet group, which when you stretch that out over 8 weeks, it's about 10,000 calories, which explained the difference in fat mass between the groups in the end. So with this study, they were trying to say it was better for fat mass, but when you look further into it, you can't say intermittent fasting is better here because they were eating less. So I think that one's kind of interested in me because, yeah, you could cite that in another paper as it being better, but the truth is they had better results because they were eating less.
Yeah, that's always right. That's always what comes up is, well, we already said it today. Like, how much of this is just another way to get in a calorie deficit? Even if it's minor, kind of thing. I do think the intermittent fasting thing is worth continued exploration. It's a different way. I think kind of what you said, Nikki, really struck me, which as a nutritionist, you don't have to educate people on counting macros, and all that kind of stuff. You're just like, here's your window, eat here, and there's not much. You don't have to learn quite as much as far as the individual nutrients because you're just doing it with the time window. It just seems simple, I used to get into that with some fellow dietitians. They would say, oh, well, Lonnie, you got to realize we're working with a lot of people. They literally have a 7th grade reading comprehension or poorer, and they're not ready for a lot of this stuff. And that felt a little elitist of them, to, like, oh, we're going to descend among the dirty masses and educate them, kind of thing. But it does make sense. I mean, simpler, Occam's razor, right? Simpler may just be better, maybe a better way. I wanted to ask you, Phil, about when you used to diet, because how do you do it? Because obviously there was a performance thing, like the little voice I have in the back of my head about you're losing muscle mass. Yours would be, bro, you're going to be weak. So I mean,
well, no, and the last time, and I stole this from you. The last time when I did that cut for, that's been 5 years ago now almost. I cut down for my 40th birthday, and just to do it because it had always been a goal. I did 1 or 2 days a week what you talked about, and I added in like a protein modified fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just have my protein for the day on 2 days a week, which put me in at the end of the week in a deficit. Because basically, let's say I had 250 grams of protein that day, times 4 calories. That's not a lot for me. Yeah. So because I never went below on an average day before I started that, like to drop down to 242, or I made it to like 226. I never went below 3,500 calories. So on the average day. So I did some of that, and it seemed to help. Then I was never starving. I'd have chicken breast or egg whites, like you said, or just a protein shake, something that had pretty much nothing but fat or nothing but protein in it. And I think it boils down to, is it helpful? I think so. Like most diets for some people, compliance. If the person will do that consistently, it's a good diet for them.
Yeah, it's straightforward.
And if it's not, then it sucks. If somebody's just like Mike was talking about, if somebody just hates it, well, I'm not going to make you do it. There's other things we can do. So
right. No, that's a good point. If your readiness to accept these conditions, if you're pissed at me from the beginning, let's not try that one.
No, I mean, like my wife, she doesn't mind not eating. She'll go to sleep and not eat till 1. So, it's probably a good strategy for her. Mm-hmm. She naturally does that anyways. So, for me, like, man, if I had to train heavy, like if I if it was set in my diet, like I'm working with Mike and he's like, Phil, you can't eat till 4 p.m. But Mike, I got to go squat 700 pounds at 10. Well, you still don't get to eat. Well, fine, this is the thought.
Right.
You don't get to eat because. So I always tend to base my eating around my training. And it's more before my training than it is after.
Yep.
So, because I want to go into a training session fueled up and ready to go. I can starve after. I'll live. Mm-hmm. But if I can get that good training session in, and I lean that way towards with most of my athletes. Let's be honest, most of the people I work with are competing in something. So, we generally fuel their training sessions, and then they can suffer after.
Yeah. I did that.
Where they're losing weight.
Yeah. When I used to, like in the last month of like a 4-month, sort of cutting phase, there's no carbs left practically. And I would 2 times a day, I'm going to, even if it's 50 grams, damn it, I'm going to have a little bit of oatmeal for breakfast and something before or after I lift, like right around the workout area. Yep. Those are the 2 times. Otherwise, my performance is going to suck. I'm going to lift like a wimp, and I'm going to lose muscle mass because the training stimulus is suffering.
Exactly, and that's what I never understood. Like everybody, for a long time there, and we worked for a place that really pushed this, the importance of the post-workout training window. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's great and all, but if I go in and have a shit-ass workout, what's the point in my because I'm not fed?
Yep.
That just sucks.
Yep.
It's the pre-training is much more important to me, especially athlete-wise. We need to go in and have a good session. That's what their life revolves around right now, is the importance of their training as a strength or sport athlete. So we do what it takes to make that good, and then adjust the rest of the diet towards their, aesthetics or, their body composition.
Right. Yep.
So we do the same thing. I mean, it all depends on your constraints too. Like you guys said, if you get to the point where you have such a low amount of carbohydrates, then where you strategically place them is probably going to make a much bigger difference.
Mm-hmm.
If you're off season, and some people I've worked with are at 500 grams of carbohydrates a day, it's like, who cares? You're constantly having enough. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if you're down near even 100, which is I'd say is low, and people are going to go below that, obviously, if you're trying to get really lean or you've got to do something crazy, I just find that I'll put them beforehand, maybe the night before, whatever will generate the biggest bump in performance, and then lower drop in their HRV the next day. Mm-hmm. So I've had him even use, 50 grams of carbohydrates during the session. It's like, yeah, I understand the literature for resistance training is super mixed on that. However, I can consistently see the next day that their HRV is not nearly as bad, right? I think some of those carbohydrates are buffering some of that stress response, or who knows what's going on. But it seems to be pretty repeatable.
Right. Yep. As we wind down, Nicole, let me ask you one thing. What about as far as, like you mentioned female athlete triad before, what's your personal, just asking for your opinion here, really, professional opinion, as far as people that are trying to rebuild after they've dealt with that, do you think intermittent fasting, is this a good thing or maybe not? Because on one side, I can see that you're not obsessively counting stuff and worried about stuff. You're just eating in a certain time window. You're just eating. But on the other side, it does call for a certain amount of discipline. What are your personal thoughts about that? Like someone who's trying to rebuild, or they've experienced some level of female athlete triad or eating disorder in the past. What's your thoughts on intermittent fasting for them?
Yeah, when I was first thinking about it, I was like, probably not for them. But I do like the point that you brought up that, then you don't have to worry so much about counting calories and macronutrients. And it's just kind of a time where you can eat ad libitum. But I don't know. For me personally, I have problems eating a lot in one sitting. So for me, if I have problems getting it in through the whole day, like 15 hours. So I probably wouldn't do it for myself, but yeah, maybe for others. It's just so highly individual, really. What works best for each athlete.
Yeah, it's like when we talk about counting and everything, diet records and that sort of thing. Like the one group I'm very wary doing that with, of course, is someone who, if they've had, especially like something related to anorexia or something, logging is usually a good idea. But there are some times when it's not such a good idea. There's got to be a looser, less obsessive, quantitative way to keep track of things, or keep it simple. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. We're just about out of time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's good to get some
thanks for being here.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. We will catch up with you again next week.
Sweet.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.